we start the session at 2:30 with Prash, I just wanted to share a poem with you that I came across as I was preparing for today online. So I'm going to ask Omar to cue that just to lead us in to our next session for 2:30. So this is something that I found on the Marie Curie website, the bereavement charity. And yeah, just really found it thought-provoking and impactful. So I hope you enjoy it.
For Robin, it's been a struggle. Constantly gnawing at her, grief refuses to leave her alone. Even invited itself to the funeral when her friends and family couldn't attend and had to watch online. Abdul's been feeling lifeless from the living room when grief cold called him. No amount of shielding could protect him from this, and grief dragged all the words out of Tyrone's mouth, left him unable to breathe, to cope, to feel for 24 hours. The next day, Tyrone went back to working from home. Sometimes grief still visits him in different guises, is an email he wasn't expecting. It suggests itself on YouTube and is a friend he might know on Facebook. And Tyrone's learned to let grief be a part of his life now. And sometimes grief isn't poetic. It just hurts. And it hurts, and it hurts. And whilst we're in lockdown, it feels like grief has nowhere else to go, because grief doesn't social distance. Grief doesn't wash its hands. Sometimes grief just sucks. And we go on, because we have to. Uniting in memory over loved ones we've now lost. Robin and the girls have traded beer gardens for webcams. £6 glasses of red have now become bottles from Tesco's, and they drink to share stories of the past. They're accepting virtual hugs in place of the real thing, and even invite grief in on the conversation, though they insist it keeps its mic muted throughout. Abdul's been ordering takeaways and Amazon deliveries, and being the essential worker that it is, grief always delivers. Abdul is coping. He's finding comfort in retail therapy over the real thing. And Tyrone writes, knows grief only came to visit when a friend he hasn't seen for 2 years was taken from him, and was surprised at how intrusive grief was annoyed when grief took over the house until he saw that grief invited over remembrance. And whilst trading tales over WhatsApp in lieu of drunken strolls down memory lane doesn't quite hit right, it does help us unite. And sometimes grief just sucks. Whenever you lose someone, of course it will, so we take time to remember them. We need time to remember them. Time to let grief turn into love. Ensure that their memories can live on. Ensure that we can leave some memories for others that will be worth grieving over.
Thanks, Omar. I wanted to just take a moment to introduce Prash Naik. I'm sure all of you know Prash by now, even if you'd never met him before, because most of you have received his book in the post. And firstly, wanted to say thank you to him for that really kind donation that allowed us to do that and just share some of his story with us. I met Prash last year through a mutual friend when we were planning this event last year in Birmingham. and it was really great to be able to connect with him from Solihull Renewal Centre, but also just to hear about his professional experience, which I know he will share about, but also some of his personal story. And I was saying to him before I sent these books out, actually, that, and you'll see that I've got lots of tabs in the pages, that I've really appreciated reading his story, and just an honest reflection from a Christian perspective of sometimes how we struggle with issues like healing, how we support family members, and all kinds of other questions that I appreciate delving into, or appreciated delving into through this book. So Prash, really appreciate you being with us this afternoon, and just look forward to hearing from you, my brother. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow, what can I say? It's been an absolutely amazing day so far. Listening to all the other speakers, I can relate to all of them in terms of everything that they've given us, the information. And I'm going to bring my perspective from an Asian man's perspective, and I'm going to amalgamate everything that you've heard, attempt to, because there's a lot of stuff that has been said by each and every presenter has relates to me. So I'm just going to bring it home in terms of how it works with me, how it fitted into my life, and also what I'm doing, and the support group. So just give you a bit of my background. I was quite happily working in IT as a Christian man for 15 years. I worked for 15 years across the West Midlands, managing teams and doing technical work as well. And then it was back in 2012 that my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was a totally came out the blue. But even at that point, we still, well, she'll be fine, because death doesn't come to our house. Surely it doesn't come to our house. She'll be fine. So even at that point, while we shed our tears at the beginning, there was we were resolute, we were strong in knowing that we'll be okay, because it don't happen to us. And it sadly, my wife passed away in 2014 on June the 5th. And during those 2 years, we struggled, we cried, we laughed. We went through a lot of spiritual battles within ourselves and certain belief structures. And when we hear certain things and what certain people say in terms of how a Christian should behave, how our faith should be at the forefront. But you know what? When the rubber hits the road, it's a totally different kettle of fish. You know, scripture comes alive when that moment hits you. And that's where, you know, then your faith is tested. And I could sit here and say, oh, we fought through, we tried our best, God was with us. But I describe in my book someone who felt he failed all the way. Each time, all I did was in this house would bring bad news. She'd have treatment that worked for a bit, and then I'm relaying bad news again. So it was a constant battle throughout, telling your family members that, oh, this is work, but then you find she's had a relapse and what have you. And so for me, that journey wasn't, I don't know where, well, I do know where the strength came from our Lord Jesus Christ, but there was always a battle. There was always that challenge to go through each step. I will spend more time on the book a bit later, but I want to just delve into what happened after and how I ended up being a chaplain, which I am now. I'm a qualified chaplain. I did an advanced diploma in chaplaincy. I've also done level 3 and level 4 counselling. So I related a lot of stuff to what Dr. Delroy was saying. It was just amazing stuff that he was saying, which related to me a lot. I recall going back to work in 2014 and looking at my work colleague, and I literally said, what on earth am I doing here? Because when you go through a traumatic time like that, I'm sure some of you relate to this, it changes you. You're not the same. That's been mentioned today as well through other speakers, that your personality, your character, everything about you changes, and you can't go back to being who you were. That person, the old me, died along with her, and a new person was suddenly being thrusted into a situation that he didn't like. That poem really resonated with me that we just heard. The word "it sucks." It seems to be a punchline a line that I use with a lot of my patients. The word "it sucks," because it is something that they need to hear. It's not easy. There aren't no nice words that you could just cover over. So I decided a year later, to leave my job. And there was a good reason for that. They treated me absolutely tremendously. They looked after me. The people I worked with were fantastic. But my personality had changed so much that I felt that this job was going to be annoying, and I just couldn't relate to all the corporate stuff now. So I did actually go in and sit with the manager and say, look, it's time for me to go, while I don't become a complete pain in the backside. That's what I literally said. And he laughed, and we laughed a bit. And I handed my notice in. But for me, it was like the dry bones. When we hear about the dry bones, that whole period for me, while I was working there, was dry bones. That was the end for me there. But when I handed my notice in, I felt a new fresh stream in me, where I started a new journey. And that journey I thought was going to be in chaplain, it's going to be in counselling. So I went and did a level 3 course. That was very challenging, because little did I know that a lot of my stuff was going to come out. And I was very much in denial in terms of moving forward. I recall halfway through the 12-week course, sitting in front of people and saying, oh, I'm ready to move on, ready to move on. And then I turned up one day and I said, I'm not ready to move on. And I remember one of the ladies just jumped up and says, hallelujah, finally he's got it. And I looked at her like, what do you mean? She says, well, and the course teacher says, Prash, we've known that since the beginning, you've not been ready, but we needed you to get to that point. And I think this is very important. And when we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with people who are going through difficult stuff, we need to allow them the space to discover where they're at in their journey. You may have the answers, you may know the answers, but sometimes we have to allow them just a bit of breathing space to speak and to understand for themselves. There's nothing better than when you get your own revelation of where you're at, whether you're reading the Bible or where you are in your life. And this was a journey for me that I finally realized that I'd reached this point. I hated every moment of being single. It was really difficult for me. I was happily married, 2 young girls, and to suddenly at the age of 48 to be thrust into a situation where I felt as if I'd reached the top of the ladder in Snakes and Ladder, but I've hit the snake and I've just slid down to number 2 again, because that's what it tends to end up, that long big snake on Snake and Ladders. So I felt, why do I have to start all this again at my age? I thought, and it's a very difficult journey. Well, after I went through that challenge, I did counseling, and I started doing level 4. However, something happened. I found I was very good at helping people, but I wasn't very good at putting a lid on it. Now, let me explain. I still had a lot of emotional stuff of my own that I hadn't quite dealt with. And when we talked today about how grief and loss can manifest itself in different forms in the body, well, for me, I struggled through level 4, and I didn't finish the course. I did the course, but I didn't finish getting the qualification. I'd had enough. I couldn't cope. My glass was totally full. I was stressed out to the hill. And I recall going to see a counselor. I went and had counseling, and the counselor turned around to me and said, what's going on with your foot? Delroy will know this. I needed a particular counselor. What's it called? It wasn't a person-centered one. I forgot what it's called now. But she was able to read more body, and my foot was twitching away like mad. And she said, what's going on with your foot? Let's talk to your foot. And we came to the point where we realized that mentally, I'd moved on. Yep, ready to move on, do this, do that. But I made some really foolish mistakes. Jumping on, the loneliness created the need to find a partner. So I'm not ashamed to admit I jumped on dating sites, Christian dating sites. It just was not working out for me. Some of the stories are be absolutely hilarious. But it was just not the right time for me in that moment. So there I am sitting with the counselor, and then she suddenly, we started to delve into what was going on, what was manifesting in my body at that time. And we realized that mentally I'd moved on. Emotionally, I was down here. As soon as we stopped and talked about the emotional aspect, the twitching of my legs stopped. And that was another 12 weeks of sessions of counseling that I had to have to allow my emotions to get back up. And that was a challenge in itself, because I realized also I'd almost created a split personality. At church, I was the laughy going, happy-go-lucky, having a laugh, having a joke. And at home, I was this absolutely miserable old man who just hated everything. And I remember we did, as Dr. Delroy will say, we did this 2-chair scenario where you have 2 chairs put out, and you put your personality traits in both chairs. And what we worked out was the miserable guy thought that the happy-go-lucky guy was immature and needed to grow up. And the happy-go-lucky guy thought the miserable guy needed to get a life, basically. It got to a point. So how do you then amalgamate these 2 personalities? But that's me. And yet I'm sitting here being arbitrator as well at the same time. It was only when both sides realized that they needed each other that they finally sat in me, even though they were back to back at first. But that was the process of them starting to gel, the counselor starting to gel me and get me back together and put me back right. So it's very important that we understand what is going on with our physique, as we've heard as well today. So I realized that counseling wasn't for me. I didn't think it was for me. While the skill sets were very good, and I learned a lot and I used them a lot. And then it was suggested to me that I go into chaplaincy, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. So a year later, because of course I hadn't even started yet, I joined the chaplains, and I just knew this was the route for me. I felt the presence of God as I sat in the course on the first day. And it was a journey that really started to propel me into what I'm doing now. First of all, we had to do a 12-week, 120 hours of placement. So everybody picked hospitals and care homes and areas like that, and they were difficult to get in. And then I noticed, I thought, well, police. And I thought, well, nobody's going to go for that. And I was right. So I decided to speak to the senior pastor, and he knew the chaplain, lead chaplain for West Midlands Police. And I went to see him, and we had a meeting, and he said, well, actually, I only wanted 120 hours of placement. He said, actually, we've got a job going if you want it. And that's in Solihull. And here again, you see God move, because I thought about it and I thought, well, I've only just started this course. I've got no experience. I don't know what I'm doing. And I thought to myself, yes, I'll take it, because only God can put you into situations that are bigger than you, which made me more dependent on God, which was good, because I really enjoyed the year I spent at West Midlands Police doing voluntary work. I'd go in 3 days. To my surprise, I picked up an award from the Black and Asian Police Association for my work, which was surprising. And you know, it was an amazing time, because the award was for the work I did, which I felt I wasn't doing much. I was just turning up. Plus, they didn't have a chaplain, so I had to start everything from scratch. They've never had a chaplain, so I set up my own processes and did what I thought, and allowed God to just guide me into becoming a chaplain and how it should be done. I then recall a conversation with my daughter. Says, well, Dad, you know what, you're not earning, are we okay? I said, yes, don't worry, we're fine, trust in the Lord. I said, when the time comes, the Lord will provide. And a few months later, I let out one of the best prayers I ever had answered by the Lord, is the quick, short ones. And he said to me, I said to the Lord, I said, Lord, it'd be nice to have a paid job. Just put that out there. 3 days later, I got a call saying there's a new role going called social prescriber. The social prescribing role is where they are looking for people who are of ministry work or chaplains to go and work in a GP practice. 40% of GP patients are non-medical, and that's amazing. So they don't take drugs. I've got my sister-in-law's brother. He's a GP, and he says, yes, I sometimes get people come in and just want to have a chat. And I realized that there's a window of opportunity there. So I applied for the job, and I got the job, and I've been doing it for over a year now. And I want to talk about my experiences working as a chaplain within the GP practice, because a lot of the stuff that we've heard today, it relates. I deal with, I would say 85% of my patients are grief and loss. So I specialize in that area. So the type of patients I'm getting, they can vary. Like we said, loss can be of different, loss can be loss of anything. We've got loss of individuals, loved ones. We've got loss of a limb as well. We can, someone not being able to have children, that can be a loss. And also people losing their pets as well. And I'm not a pet person, but I know that those who have pets, they love them dearly, and it is just something very meaningful and close to them. And they are quite, they struggle when they lose their pets as well. So I don't dismiss that at all. And a lot of patients I've noticed, there's a lot of guilt, especially after. And I've always said this to my patients. I said, first of all, it's okay not to be okay. And that is something that is very important, that we realize that we go through stuff at times which is really painful. And you've got to first admit and understand that you're not going to be able to handle everything. Knowing your limits, as we've heard today, is very important. And it was very clear to me that a lot of these patients as well thought there was something wrong with them. They thought, oh, I'm ill. There's something not right. I says, no. I says, you're grieving. You're grieving. I said, it's okay not to be okay. And a lot of these people do feel bad, or they feel that there's something, they don't understand what grief is. And that is a major problem that we have in society, that as we don't talk about it, all through different cultures. I know growing up myself within the Asian community, this isn't something that we talked about. I recall when my uncle passed away, when back in the early 80s, I was only 11, 12. We suddenly got, he's okay, he's okay, he's okay. And then suddenly he's dead. So there was no involvement. And nowadays, one thing I did was I made sure, and me and my wife did, we involved our daughters as much as we could without stressing them out to a point where they would panic. It's getting that balance right. What do we say to the kids? And we've seen that today in some of the questions. What do we say to people? How do we put it? When my wife had 6 months to live, how do you tell the kids? What do you do? To tell a child of whatever age that their mother only has 6 months to live, that would have been the wrong thing for me to do at the time, because then that would almost have started a countdown clock for the children. So what we did, we said, look, your mom's now, we've tried all the treatment and everything. We just need to pray now so mom gets better. So I sought the advice of my senior minister at the time, and that was the best, that at the time, advice that we could give our children. And it is like that question that was asked earlier about your loved one is now a star in the cloud. That's a difficult question to answer, and I think it's down to the individual, how you see it best, with all the compassion that you have to answer that in a way that isn't harmful, and yet as honest as you can make it. So a lot of the patients that I had 2 this week that I've been dealing with, where they're actually the loss of a loved one, but through suicide. One where a son's committed suicide, and another one where her partner, he has committed suicide. So there are so many different variations of grief and loss that you may come across. And there are a lot of places where you can get suicide prevention and understanding about that kind of loss as well. There's a lot of anger involved there. So it's very important that we do our best to educate ourselves about these kind of situations. So this is a new service that has been kicked off. We've basically been a pilot. We're now going permanent. And it's called Dudley Integrated Health and Care Trust. It's a new trust that the NHS have started, where they're putting all the well-being packages together in terms of health and well-being, grief and loss. And that is something that is being rolled out across the country. You should, depending on your area, especially if you're in the Dudley area right now, be able to ring up your GP and speak to your chaplain, and that chaplain may be me or it be someone else. I cover the Stourbridge area, so I've got about 30,000 patients which I cover. I deal with about 5 patients a day. I work Monday to Thursday, and it is varies. It varies from different loss. Sometimes it's anxiety, stress, loneliness, COVID issues as well. So there are a variety of issues there, but even being at home in lockdown is a loss of social life, a loss of interaction with your loved ones. I would say right now, COVID has, and the lockdown has compounded the issues that people already have. So I've got patients who have lost loved ones 4 years ago, and then suddenly saying, well, I was fine, but then I don't know why it's all coming back up again now. And it's the fact that they've been locked down and isolated. You've got more time to think. And some people haven't really dealt with it. We heard about crying today, and I cried a lot. I have no, whether it was in church or at home, I've cried a lot. I've cried in front of my children, and it is probably one of the best things you can do. Why is that? Because if you have ever had that fizzy drink in a bottle, not a glass bottle, a soft bottle, and you shake it. Now, what happens when the gas builds up? It just gets tighter and tighter and tense. And then when you do open it, it explodes. Well, tears act like a release valve. They allow us to release the emotion in us, and they allow us to express ourselves in a way that we can't through words. And most people nowadays you will tend to find that you will feel a bit better after it, a bit of a release. It's not great, but there does come a point in time when the tears do stop, and that's when the next process we go through. I've heard a lot about the Kubler-Ross process, and you go through all the different stages of loss. It's more like, I liked what Pete did this morning with the box, and you just scribble. I mean, and if you look in the Kubler-Ross books, you'll find it's a nice linear kind of pattern like that. It's more like the scribble. 1 minute you'll be angry, next minute you'll be frustrated, next minute you'll be sad. It's all over the place, and that is what grief does to you. It just manifests in every single different way possible. So that was my journey in terms of my work journey. So at renewal, it was a strange thing, because after 3 months after my wife passed away, I did have this urge. I wanted to help some people. I wanted to provide something because I didn't want people to go through the same process that I did, that I went through. It was heavy, it was hard, and I thought I might be able to give something back. So we started a men's bereavement group called No Man Walks Alone. I started it with 2 other gentlemen. The irony is of the name No Man Walks Alone, sadly, my other 2 compatriots who were doing that passed away, went on to be with the Lord. So I did end up on my own, in a sense. So, and I've been running that group for a while. There's also a ladies group there called Forget Thee Not, and that is very good. Ladies are very good. Most ladies are very good at expressing themselves. Men are not, and that was proven true in my men's group, where the most I'd get is 4 or 5 guys turn up, and men were very reluctant to discuss their feelings in a group session. So I had to adapt to it And we stopped the group sessions, and now I do them on a one-to-one basis. I do have another group on a Friday evening, men's social. So once I've dealt with the individuals on a one-to-one basis, I will then introduce them to the social group so they've got some interaction back. The ladies group has been running 12 years plus strong, and 65 to 70 ladies meet once a month, and it's just amazing, to be honest. Like I said, ladies are very good at expressing themselves, and it's just wonderful when you see that. Men, we're a bit too much macho stuff. We all grown up in that kind of attitude of machoism. I struggled with that when I had a bust up at work because of the stress I was going through. And my boss suggested, I suggest you go for some counselling. And my reaction was, I don't want to counselling. That's for losers and wimps. That's what I actually said. And it just shows how it changed me. Counselling did. To actually be made a man out of me, actually, because it enabled me to understand that I have weaknesses, and I have feelings as well that needed to be addressed. So that was very, very important for me to have that counselling and to run this group. My group still run at Renewal, and I'm also duty pastor there on Tuesday nights and on Sundays as well. I'm part of palliative care team, and I think Ruth mentioned as well regarding before someone dies, and there is something that's called anticipatory grief. In other words, we can grieve before that person's even actually died, and that is something that we also need to recognize as well. I recall a time when my wife and I were sitting in a bedroom, and she turned to me and she said, I don't want to die. And I remember turning back to her and said, I didn't know what to say. And she was reading the word. I said, it's all right, we'll be okay, just carry on reading the word. There was nothing else I could really say. But I think that night really hit me that I could potentially be on my own here. And this was when it really struck me that this situation could arise. I still believe that God would heal her. Sadly, it wasn't to be, and I'm sure I'll touch on that within the Q&A as well when we get there. But my book, going back to my book, how did it come about? Now, it wasn't some inspiration that, write a book and explain things to people. No, I actually wrote the book because somebody actually cheesed me off in church, which is funny, really. It wasn't at the time, but when I think about it now, it's crazy. And the gentleman meant well, it's just that I took it the way I felt at the time, because he said, oh, Prash, it's nice to see you back. And it's good to see that you're moving on. And I thought, moving on? I'm nowhere near moving on. And I recall driving home and going back to what Delroy was saying. First of all, I thought I was more moaning, but I was lamenting. And I was saying to the Lord, well, what's he mean by that? Moving on? I haven't moved on. And I felt almost cheated that I've been through 2 years of her treatment to her death. And he summed it up in a phrase. And I remember just sitting there, and suddenly I had this little voice in my head just say, write a book. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea, write a book. So I wrote it a year later because I was nowhere ready at that point in time to write the book, but I wrote it a year later. But there is something cathartic about putting it down on paper. And it was almost, I wrote the book at night. Why? Because I didn't want the girls to interrupt me. Because a lot of the time, as I was writing, I was also wiping away the tears. So there's a lot of stuff that starts to come back out, and memories start to come out as you're writing. It took me 10 months to write the book. I finally got the book done. Took another 6 months to publish it. But it is a cathartic experience to write that down. And I'm glad I did now, because it's an opportunity, hopefully, for people to see my journey, relate to it, because we all grieve differently, and how it affected my life, and how it could possibly help any individuals out there who are going through the same process as well. So that is basically the crux of my journey and how I've come to this place right now. Questions, I'm going to go to Cassius, and you know, if there are any questions, then please do fire away. I always say the silliest question is the one you don't ask.
Mm-hmm.
So ask away. You can't upset me. So don't worry about it. It'll be a pleasure.
Prash, thank you for just not just sharing your story, but also pulling the strands together from the day, and from what you've heard different speakers share. That's I think been really helpful to really, you know, validate some of the other things that have been said, and help us who are listening just to join some of the strands together. I wondered, there was one question in particular. There's a couple of things. One is, if you could say a little bit more, if there are churches who may not be the size of Renewal Christian Centre, because I know it's quite a significant ministry and size congregation, who are thinking about setting up some kind of bereavement ministry. What are the kind of things that they should think about put in place that are really important? And then the second one was just related to the book. One of the early questions that I had when I sent it out, someone asked me, you know, where did the title come from? You know, A Journey's End, and what was that about? So if you could share a bit.
Yeah. Your first question, in terms of support groups, it's very important you get, first of all, people will want to help and have some kind of experience in grief and loss, or qualified. I've always said at least level 3 counseling level is required, because there is one key aspect of supporting someone: active listening. You cannot underestimate the need for active listening. A lot of times what I learned was, sometimes when we're listening to someone, we're already formulating the answer in our head and what we think that person might say. So it's very important that we learn the skill sets as well. If you can find someone who has got experience in grief and loss, and who is willing to participate, then I think it's important that they do that they apply that. Your second question was on the title of the book.
Yeah.
Well, book titles are always a bit difficult, but I did think about it, and at the time, for me, cancer was the end of a journey. I was married for 16 years. The death of my wife, and at that point, and after the funeral, it felt as if this is a brand new journey there now. So I had come to a journey's end. 16 years of marriage just ended. So for me, it was a new chapter to just rediscover who I was and who am I in this new world that, frankly, I didn't want to be in. So that's where the title came from.
Thank you. Just a question, and and then a point that I'll make just to give you a little bit of thinking time. So Karenza's asked, it sounds like you had some excellent counselling. Was there a process for you of finding someone you could relate to, or did that just come together? And the comment is just in relation to church folks who may be thinking about setting up some kind of bereavement support. There is the bereavement groups that can be set up. The bereavement journey groups is a 6-session course, and I will share the link with folks when you get your documents through. But yeah, really worth looking into that if you are considering some kind of support and you want something really structured that's been tried and tested to use in your church context. It's actually for people of all faiths and none. So the first 5 sessions are for anyone, and then the 6th session is a specific optional one for people who may not want to engage with the faith questions. But Prash, if you could, just say a little bit about the process of finding an appropriate counsellor.
For the first, I had 3 lots of counselling sessions, which were 6 for the first one. That was during the period while she was going through her treatment. So there was no thought process in terms of who I wanted as a counsellor. That was more out of, you need to go, you're going to go, so go and have some. Second time around, that was my last set of counselling sessions. There was a process. I went to see, that's it. I was looking for a Gestalt therapist, different, which Delroy will understand what I'm going to say, and those of you who are counsellors. And I wanted a Gestalt.
That was the 2 chairs that you were talking about.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I wanted a specific type of counsellor to deal with me now and what was going on with me now. So I did go and see 2 different types. I had a session with each one, and then I chose one. So yes, I did feel that you've got to have a counsellor that you are comfortable with. So, because sometimes there are male counsellors out there women may not be comfortable with. I tell you something now, I did not want a male counsellor. And my thinking and my logic behind that was women are more in touch with their emotions. And that's just the mentality I had at the time. And I thought, well, I want someone who's going to help me, and women are better at it, because I was probably projecting my own lack of emotion and stereotyping male counsellors in that sense.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to invite Sharon if she wants to share any reflection briefly, but you touched on your heritage, Prash, as an Asian man, and I noticed that you'd put in the comments earlier, actually a lot earlier, when Jadine was sharing about 9 nights and talking about similar reflections or practices around bereavement within the Asian community. And again, just wondered if you would share a bit from your perspective of what has been perhaps particular challenge for our Asian brothers and sisters, and also related to that, from the questions of faith, you being an Asian Christian, and whether that brought particular tensions around the bereavement process.
Yeah, I think being the only Asian Christian in our family, apart from my girls, my brother and my sister were very protective, and they looked after me, and they said, you do what you want to do. I was going to have a Christian funeral. We were not going to have anything. We were not going to have a Hindu a ceremony or anything. So I had to stick to my principles, which didn't go down well with my father-in-law when he turned up from India. He was not happy. And I remember on the morning of the funeral, he's actually come up to discuss with him how he would like the coffin in the house. He wants it open so they can do their stuff and this. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, but you seem to have forgotten your daughter was a Christian. So that's what we're doing. And that was hard for me because you've got to stick to what you believe. There were a lot of challenges and trials even before. They wanted to bring in a Hindu priest to come and pray over and stuff. And I recall speaking to my wife, and we sat there and we said, look, and I wrote back to them. They emailed me. They didn't even bother speaking to me. And I said, we're not going to do that. I said, it's not about whether she lives or dies. Our faith is about our journey. It's our walk of life. So it doesn't. If she dies, then she dies a Christian. But we're not going to go back and do something that we do not believe in. You know, and this is the reality that we need to face when our faith is challenged in that way. You had another question which have slipped my mind.
Yes, there actually was another question.
Yeah.
From Karenza. She's asked, was the counselling also part of the journey for your daughters?
Yes, for one, no for the little one. Totally two different characters. My little one, like I put a note on earlier, the youngest, on the day my wife passed away, she went to school. I spoke to the senior minister who was with me. I said, she wants to go to school. What do I do? He said, send her to school. So it was strange because me, along with the little one and a whole posse of relatives, went down to the school. I phoned the school in advance. She went at 12:30 and she spent the day at school. And yet my eldest stayed at home, and she's very emotional. She had counseling. My eldest had counseling. She had sessions because children, it is very difficult for them. Her emotions were high one minute and then low the next. So she was basically on this roller coaster. As she had her counseling sessions, that petered out and we started to see her level off. And I think she's better for it now. My little one refused the counseling. And I think she's got a bit of a dad in her. So that doesn't help personality wise. So she's a lot, but she seems okay, but I am wary that in future life, as she gets older, we don't know what the consequences of that are going to be. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because through you being transparent, through you sharing your story, you carry a message of hope. Somebody can look at you and think, okay, I have a sense of direction, and especially through sharing through your book as well. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And to say again, anybody, if you're not feeling okay, there are resources at the end where you can access.
There's one thing I'd like to add is on the financial side, sorting things out. There is always this constant battle between, as Christians, faith. When is faith, and when are we not in faith? And we struggled with this dilemma, especially in the last 6 months. We had to get our financial house in order. We knew that, but I recall having this conversation with but are we walking in faith? We want you to get healed, but by going and sorting out our financial situation, are we negating our faith? And we literally had that conversation. And it's sensible to go and have your finances in order. It is very good. It's very good that you get that done. And I recall we had a friend who came up and said, look, God is your plan A. Plan B is you just getting your finances right. But God will always be your plan A. Just remember that. But we have that emotional battle as Christians in terms of faith.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prash, and thank you for that reminder, Sharon, about taking care of ourselves as we support others as well. I was looking at a small pamphlet yesterday, and it was equating it to putting on an oxygen mask if we are wanting to support others, to make sure that we're taking care. There are a couple of groups that I've highlighted where people are able to access free bereavement support that have been on the rolling notices. Prash has mentioned the groups at renewal, and you will get those details amongst others. But also Yvonne Richmond Tulloch is going to be joining us shortly, the head of Atalos. And the Atalos website, if you haven't visited it, I'd encourage you to do that, atalos.org.uk, and that will enable you to look at local bereavement services in your area. But we also know there are national groups like CRUISE, if people are in emergency situations, like Samaritans, who will offer support. And really important, I think, just to build a bit of a toolbox to know different places to be able to signpost people to, or to go yourself if needed. So I'm going to ask Omar just to get that poll ready for us for the session as we start winding down. Thank you. Omar, do you feel more confident about providing support through bereavement as a result of what you've heard? Do you feel more confident about providing support through bereavement as a result of what you've heard? And those results are starting to come in now. Yeah, so this is the final session, and we will be finishing up with, we're going to hear from Sandra Wilkinson, who's going to share a poem with us shortly, and Yvonne to share her own thoughts. And we will finish in time for 4 o'clock. I'd invite you not to rush off if you are able to stay with us. I would love to hear your feedback. And so there's a short survey at the end of the day. You will get it in an email. So if you do need to go, don't worry. But it would be great if you're able to stay with us until 4, so that you're able to participate and hear everything live. So I'm going to end that poll now and share the results. So again, the vast majority, Prash, feeling more confident about providing support. Really appreciated hearing your honest story as well, and a number of comments in the chat. Thank you for sharing. Good point on the finances. That's a whole other session. That's to do with my other job, just around finances and bereavement, and people saying thank you for sharing. So I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
And yeah, just your honest reflection, actually, in sharing with all of us your story. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any final comments before we finish this session?
No, I think it's just be kind to yourself. You know, be fair to yourself, be honest with yourself, know your limits, know what you can do and what you can't do. I've just had a week off from work because all I've done is listen to people, about 20 patients a day, 20 patients in a week. It's tough. So, you know, if you're ready to help, do understand what you can and cannot do.
Okay. Well, bless you, and thanks again. And thank you, Sharon, as well, for your reflection. So yeah, I can see that, yeah, someone said thank you very much for sharing, and the book is excellent. So highly recommended. If you haven't had an opportunity to read that book, I'd encourage you to do it. Really great in terms of, I felt, unpacking some of the questions around faith that we may struggle with and healing. And I felt that was really dealt with sensitively and honestly through the book that Prash wrote. So thank you and bless you. We're just going to pause for a moment, and I'm going to just see if I can get the technology to work to invite in Sandra Wilkinson to
I'm
share.
on.
Oh, you're there.
I'm on, yeah.
Hey.
I'm just trying to make sure that my camera is in a place that doesn't fall over.
The technology stuff is just great, right? All of us having to adapt to looking as if we're in TV studios or something now.
Yeah.
You'd be interested to know how I've got my laptop propped on different things for the session today. But I really appreciate you joining us, Sandra, and yeah, just wanted to invite you to share your poem with us, and that's going to lead us into our just hearing some thoughts and reflections from Yvonne. I should say that Sandra is again a longtime friend, now residing in Wolverhampton and lecturing, but has always been creative and written poetry and been involved in music. So really pleased that you're able to join us and share this afternoon.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. This poem is called Live On. As the world wakes up to another loss, our hearts cry, we ask, Father, how do we live on? As the world wakes up to another loss, our hearts grieve and they bleed tears we have yet to shed. We ask if we're made for this. Are we strong enough? Isn't life supposed to be a gift? So who's stealing it? And what of our dreams? What does this all mean? How do we begin to mend the shredded seams? We long for a story tale that ends well, but life is no story. It's a beautiful journey. The sorrow is real, and so is the pain. But joy does come with morning. But to see it, we must live another day. We must live it for those who cannot, for those whose lives were cut short. We must answer sorrow with hope, not of a better tomorrow, but a better today. When we lose, the answer is to live. For those who have gone need us to breathe and fight on. When we lose, the answer is to live. For those who have gone need us to breathe and fight on. There are still great battles to be won, rivers to cross, injustices to right, and dances of victory to dance. There are still breaches to mend and generations to arm with love and truth. It hurts, really hurts. But when we lose, let's choose to live on. Thank you.